Hello again. Welcome to this third video in the 5-video series. In this video, we're going to talk about some things that might actually get a little bit close to you and touch on your childhood, maybe touch on some sensitive areas in your life. So I ask you to just brace yourself a little bit and be prepared to be patient with the process. Sometimes we have to get a little bit uncomfortable in order to allow growth. And you know, the point of this series is to set us up for a really successful and fulfilling second half of life. In order to do that, that's going to necessarily involve doing some deep thinking about who we are, where we come from, where we're headed, and what really is driving our decision-making process. Okay, so having said that, let me ask you a question. Have you ever found yourself at one of those crossroads in your life where you just were not sure which way to go? You know, we all experience these. Sometimes they're small little decisions like, salad or burger. But sometimes they're huge life-shaping decisions like a career move or the decision to start or end a serious relationship. Now, learning how to make decisions well is a critical life skill and one that only comes with practice, just like all skills that you have now. At one point, you had to learn those starting from scratch. So, how do we know what is the right decision to make? And how do we arrive at the confidence to be able to be bold and decisive when we need to be? Well, you have to cultivate the skill of discernment. Just to be clear, I want to be specific about what I mean when I use this word. The dictionary.com gives 2 definitions, and both of them are useful to us here. The first definition is to perceive by the sight or some other sense or by the intellect. To see, to recognize, to apprehend. As in, they discerned a sail on the horizon. So, in order to discern, we must perceive using our sight or some other sense. We'll talk more about the senses that we might need to bring this task a little bit later, but at this point, let's look first at that second definition. The second definition says to distinguish mentally, recognize as distinct or different, to discriminate. He is incapable of discerning right from wrong, would be an example of this type of definition. Now, we know that discrimination has become kind of a dirty word in our society because people do discriminate unjustly. Of course, it's wrong to discriminate against people based on their race, creed, socioeconomic status, or on the basis of their perceived worth as a person. I believe all people are infinitely valuable because all people have an element of divinity designed into them, and every person has the potential to make a huge contribution to the betterment of all of humanity. But think about the world we would have if everyone were completely indiscriminate. This would be a world where nobody even tried to separate right from wrong, good from bad. What kind of world would this be? Sometimes it is important to discriminate between positive, productive actions and negative, destructive actions. Choosing between the myriad of choices in life requires that we exercise discernment. Have you ever signed up for an exercise class or a gym membership? Unless you've always stayed in shape, the first few classes of a new program can be pretty daunting. When you're the newbie in the class, even the simplest movements can be baffling, can't they? But before long, you find that you can do these same movements without strain, and you now notice how awkward the newbies look to you. This is the nature of learning. This is because you have tuned your skills of discernment. You understand more about the movements, so you have insight into things that were mysterious before. Honing your skills of discernment is a critical element of learning to make good decisions. Just like learning new exercise movements, the way to become better at discernment is simply to practice. So, the more you flex your decision-making muscles, the stronger they become. So, if we're going to cultivate the skill of discernment, we must practice discernment. The only problem is that often the decisions which face us are fraught with danger and risk, and many people freeze up in the moment of choice and simply cannot force themselves to move forward. This is a fear response. Rather than concentrate on the choice to be made, we instead focus on the consequences of making the wrong choice. Fear is a funny thing. We have not fully left behind the primitive parts of our biology. We often react to fear as though our life was in peril, when in fact it is not. It's too deep of a discussion to go fully into the science behind fear in this particular video. But just let me say that fear robs our mind of its ability to think clearly, rationally, and logically. This is why it is imperative that we cultivate or practice our discernment constantly. Think about this. For every huge, life-altering decision that we must make, there are hundreds or thousands of small, low-risk choices to be made, right? So if we practice discernment constantly, it stands to reason that we will naturally have hundreds of opportunities to hone our skill on little choices that don't matter much before we're faced with the really big choices that carry so much risk. Choices like, which dressing would you like on your salad, are legitimate choices, but they are not high risk, at least not in that particular moment. Working with choices like these allows us to practice the skill of discernment so that we will be strong and confident when we get to the big decision. Does this make sense to you? It is a simple, logical way to exercise our discernment muscles before we get to the decision that carries so much risk and consequence. Let's take this a little deeper. There are multiple facets to a well-made choice. The first and most fundamental is learning to recognize a good choice when you see one. The next part of it is to have the courage to act once the correct choice has been identified. Again, this is why we start with the little decisions. It would be foolish for a person to attend their first ice skating lesson and attempt a complex and dangerous technique like the triple Lutz, wouldn't it? Of course you wouldn't do that. The same idea applies here. Start with simple, clear choices and take the fear out of the equation. What type of dressing would you like on your salad? There are usually only 2 or 3 possible outcomes in a moment like that, and none of them are really very dangerous. Still, it is possible to get bogged down even in that question, isn't it? Let's see. Does this salad have apples? Does it have croutons? Does it have meat? What dressing choices are available? Just make a choice already. Vince Lombardi said, practice does not make perfect. Only perfect practice makes perfect. So be careful what you practice. We spend way too much time practicing failure. If you want to become better at making decisions, you have to actually decide something. And even more to the point, once you've made your choice, you must immediately act upon it. Now, I know that some people who watch this will be saying, but what if I choose poorly? It's a salad, for crying out loud. Get over it. It doesn't matter. And remember, failure is a critical part of the journey to success. If you aren't failing, you aren't growing. And we could do an entire video just on that one point. Now do you see why it's so important to practice discerning a lot of small, insignificant choices? Try, fail, try, fail, try, fail, try, succeed. That's how it works. Okay, so we know that we must become better at recognizing the right choice, and we have to take action and face the consequences. It all makes sense, doesn't it? And yet, I know that the thought of even small failures is just terrifying to some people. So let me reframe that, and maybe I can help you become a little bit more comfortable with it. Have you ever started to drive a car that was parked by somebody else? And when you began to drive, you realized that the other person had left the wheels at a strange angle. If the car starts to move in a direction other than the one you wanted to go, what do? Do you panic? Do you scream? Do you call 911? Of course not, right? All you do is you turn the wheel. You just make an adjustment. This is the essence of making decisions. You can't steer a car when it's sitting still. You must begin to move, and then you can adjust along the way to navigate to the goal that you're wanting to achieve. So I like to say that making choices is a triple A process, and it goes like this: adopt, act, adapt. 3 A's: adopt, act, and adapt. You adopt your choice, you act decisively, and you adapt to whatever feedback you get as you begin to move forward. Doesn't that make sense? It's very simple. So write that down. Being decisive is a triple A state. Now, we need to spend a little bit of time looking at this other word, determination. Determination is closely related to the word terminate. In other words, final or finished. End of story. So, too many people spend their lives waffling back and forth between this and that, never able to really settle on anything and stick with it. Why do you think that is? One of the reasons we do this is because we are not really acting on determinations we've arrived at on our own. Too often, we're only acting on determinations that others have projected onto us. For instance, if one of your parents is essentially a racist, you're going to grow up hearing racist language, laughing at racist jokes, and probably thinking racist thoughts. And then you leave home, and you begin to actually come to know some people of that other race. What happens then? Well, you probably are going to find that for some mysterious reason, the people of that other race that you meet do not exhibit those traits that you've been taught. When that happens, you only have 2 choices. One choice would be to dismiss it as a fluke and assume that the person you know is an exception to the rule. The other choice is to go into deep denial, become resentful and hateful, to push that other person away so that you don't have to deal with the truth that your belief is invalid. When I moved from Wyoming into the Deep South, I saw this happen. We worked on a crew with Caucasian people, African American people, and Vietnamese people. The crew worked together very well, and we enjoyed each other's company. We laughed, we had fun. It was a great cross-cultural experience for me. 3 of us, 2 white and 1 black, rode home together in a pickup truck. We were great buds, or so I thought. Shortly after we dropped off Joe, my black friend, another driver cut us off in traffic. Unfortunately, that other driver happened to be a person with extremely dark skin color. What happened next taught me something about race relations. In a fit of anger, completely out of proportion to the offense, my coworker began to swear and call the other driver by the nastiest racist names he could think of. I was really shocked by this. I turned and I looked at him and I said, "We just dropped off Joe 5 minutes ago. How can you use words like that?" In a very superior tone, he explained to me, "Well, you see, there are good ones and there are bad ones." Let me tell you something that you might find shocking. My friend was right. There are good ones and bad ones in every possible color, shape, and size. If you've grown up lumping people into categories based on skin tone, belief system, body type, or gender, you need to check yourself. There's a great line in the movie Forrest Gump. Forrest is explaining where he got his name. It turns out his mama named him after Nathaniel Bedford Forrest. Now, Nathaniel Bedford Forrest was a lieutenant general in the Confederate Army, and he was also the first Grand Dragon of the Ku Klux Klan. Forrest Gump, in his simple yet profound way, said, "Mama named me after him to help me remember that sometimes people do things that just don't make no sense." How about you? Were you taught things that really just don't make no sense when you examine them in the bright light of logic and reason? Sometimes the things we feel most strongly about are the things we did not come up with on our own. We just adopted them from others. Now, part of me wants to just pause this video right here and let you think about that, because your determinations will shape your destiny. If you feel strongly about something, especially those things that make your blood boil, you'd be wise to pause and really examine that belief. Now, I know I'm pushing people's buttons here, and I apologize for that. But the truth is, we can't grow and be comfortable at the same time. You have to choose one or the other. You can either be comfortable or you can grow. So if you're going to have a successful second half of your life and feel fulfilled and find meaning and make a real contribution, you're going to have to deal with some of these issues that you sort of glossed over during the first half. Now, if this is rubbing you the wrong way, just stop and realize that it is okay, because I'm probably offending people on both sides of every major issue you can think of. None of us like to have our beliefs challenged. And yet, if we do not choose our determinations carefully, they will drive us to places that we never meant to go. Your determinations will shape your destiny. What do you want your contribution to this world to be? Do you want to sow love or hate? Do you want to build things, or do you want to tear down things that others have built? Will the world be better or worse as a result of you walking here? These are big questions, and our determinations are what produce the answers to those questions. Here is a simple exercise for you. Think of an issue that is explosive for you. You know, that hot button topic that will set you off on a tirade. With that issue in mind, but without getting overly emotional about it, think calmly and go back to the first time you can remember holding that belief. My experience is that in most cases, those hot button beliefs either came from our elders projecting their anger onto us, or they came from some painful experience in our earlier life. There are exceptions to the rule, of course, but almost always we got those beliefs from an unhealthy place. If you're carrying a belief that was sparked in you because of somebody hurting you or doing you wrong, that's a belief that's really driven by anger. And anger is not good for us. Anger will poison you and ruin your whole life if you carry it around with you long enough. So these beliefs that cause so many problems in society all around the world either grow out of our own anger or are adopted from the anger of others. Once again, discernment is the key. Wow, you didn't see that turn coming, did you? That was enough to give you whiplash, wasn't it? I didn't do a U-turn just now like you might think I did. In fact, I'm leading you around in a circle. We start with honing our discernment, then we examine our determinations, and the only way to know if they are valid is to engage our skills of discernment. Are you tracking with me? This is a never-ending process of becoming increasingly aware of things that don't make sense and then adjusting accordingly. Let me give you an example out of biology. In 2003, a complete mapping of the human genome was achieved. The genome, or gene sequence, is a unique sequence of DNA that exists in every single cell within a given organism. So every cell of my body has got a given sequence of DNA present in it that's different from any DNA in any cell in your body. No two individuals are the same, and it's our DNA that produces our uniqueness. DNA stands for deoxyribonucleic acid. Now, that is just a fun word to say. Try it. Now, say it 10 times fast. Go ahead, I'll wait. Now that I've stated that we are all unique individuals, let's go a little bit deeper with this concept. Do you know what the difference is between the DNA of a chimpanzee and a human? About 6%. 94% of our DNA as humans is exactly like the DNA of the chimpanzee. Now guess what the difference is between the DNA of one person to the DNA of another person. It's about 1/10 of 1%, if you can believe that. Isn't that crazy? So you've heard me say this before, and I mean it literally. We are all unique, and yet we are all the same. Now, You may be holding on to your beliefs about racial division and say, yes, but look how much difference that 1/10 of 1% makes. So here's one last little coal to cook your noodle with. 99% of that minuscule variation can be found within any ethnic group, provided you have a sample of at least 10,000 individuals. Now, did you catch that? You can pick people all from one ethnic group and find 99% of those variations as long as you have a good-sized sample. So this isn't really about difference in race. We really are essentially the same. So the bottom line is, it doesn't make sense to focus on the ways that we are different. It's much more beneficial to focus on all the things that we have in common. Isn't it interesting how we can take two simple little words like discernment and determination and dig into them so deeply? You are engaged in a very important project. You are creating your future self. Who you are today is a product of what you did in the past. Who you will become is a product of what you do from this moment forward. You are way more powerful than you ever imagined. You can literally recreate yourself just by carefully discerning and selecting your determinations. So I ask you again, what do you want to be? What do you want your life to mean? And what legacy do you want to leave behind? The good news is that you are in control of the outcomes of all of these questions. It's your life. Break free and live abundantly. My name is Tom Epperson, and I'll see you in the next video.